Yeah, while I'm putting on my socks a little bit, tell me, we're here to talk about zero hunger and how do we get to that goal. Um, can you define, in your own experience, what the scope of the problem is? Just kind of lay it out for everybody what exactly we're dealing with in terms of numbers and potential solutions.
Yeah, so over 800 million people worldwide are suffering from food poverty. And it's a highly complex problem. So I suppose the work we do in FoodCloud is we redistribute surplus food to charities. So we recognised that there was all of this food going to waste on one side, and then there were people that actually didn't have enough to eat, which is incredibly immoral, especially when you consider the environmental impact of all of that food. And we ensure that that food gets to charities that can really benefit from it, and then those charities support their communities and the people that are in their communities that are struggling. But from working with these nonprofits, so we're working with about 8,000 charities across the UK and Ireland, and actually they provide so much support beyond just food, because food poverty is very complex. You can't just give somebody food and lift them out of food poverty. They need education, they need employment, they need access to food. Often people they don't know how to cook with healthy food. So what we have learned is that providing food to these charities actually acts as a short-term solution, but then the support that charities provide alongside the food around education and training is actually what's going to tackle the problem in the longer term. So I think having both side by side is very important to solving this.
And how come the particular problem of hunger, resonated with you?
I suppose when I was in university, it was after the economic crash. So I remember when I was doing my exams and trying to choose what university course, I very quickly went from, you can do anything you want to, you better do something that you can get a job in, because there aren't that many anymore. And it was a very different climate to what I'd experienced growing up. And when I became aware of the problem of food waste, at the same time we were seeing communities across Ireland really, really struggling. So it was a very challenging time. Charities were experiencing massive funding cuts, but also at the same time an increased demand for their services. So just being aware of all of the challenges that people and communities were facing, new challenges, and then at the same time seeing how much food we were wasting really just made me want to come up with the solution. And I suppose, kind of lucky, we came up with a solution that can now actually benefit other charities internationally and actually beyond Ireland.
Right on. I think for me, it was kind of a weird connection, but I was interviewing the rapper 50 Cent, and so I do media, entertainment, and music at Forbes, and yeah, interviewing 50 Cent, and he had an energy shot. It was kind of a 5-hour energy competitor, and his whole idea was for every energy shot that was sold, I think it was $3, he would donate a meal through the UN World Food Program, and it's something like 10 cents a meal, 10 or 20 cents a meal, very easy kind of thing. So I thought, well, gee, in addition to writing for Forbes, I write books. Why don't I do the same thing? I'll donate, a meal per book. Why not? It's easy. Maybe it becomes a trend that people would start doing. And I think people don't realize how. I mean, obviously, it's a huge problem, but the amount of money that it takes on a per unit basis. I know we're talking about slightly different things, providing meals versus preventing food waste. Is actually kind of, in some cases, it's very doable.
Yeah, well, so an interesting statistic that the UN came out with was if you could take just 25% of all of the food that's going to waste, that's actually enough to feed the over 800 million people that are malnourished globally. Like, that is crazy that we're wasting 4 times more food than we need to feed all of the hungry people. But one of our key metrics is our cost per meal. So we always measure how much it costs us to redistribute food, because our aim is to bring that cost as low as possible. Because the lower it costs per meal to redistribute food, the more food we can redistribute, and the more people that we can help in that way. So it is very important. And one of the aims of using technology is really to reduce that cost. So there are amazing organizations internationally that ensure that people that redistribute food and provide food aid, but they're very heavy on capital costs because of the infrastructure and the logistics behind actually making that food get to people. So our aim is to we use the technology in Ireland, but also to support other international charities through our technology so that they can reduce their costs and become more efficient, and therefore feed more people.
And what is the range of cost per meal saved at this point?
Sorry.
How much does it cost to save a meal at this
Oh,
point?
so it's not 8 cents, 8.1 cents, I think we were at last time. 8.
Yeah. Right. So very, very doable, and cheaper than buying a new meal entirely, of course.
Yeah, it'd be kind of
Right,
worrying if
right,
we were more expensive than buying food.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the journey, founding FoodCloud, how you kind of brought it along to where you are today.
Yeah, so it started, I was in my third year in university and recognised that these two problems existed in Ireland and needed a solution. Like, it really started off as kind of a small project to see if businesses had food that was going to waste, would they donate it if they had a way to donate it, and could charities benefit from the food. This research, I suppose, led us to understanding the problem a lot more. I remember at the very beginning being probably a bit naive and thinking like, I know loads about the food waste problem now, and I know loads about the struggles for people that are in food poverty in Ireland. So even in Ireland, 1 in 8 people are suffering from food poverty. But actually, the real problem was why it's difficult for businesses to donate food. So for the first year, we really spent a lot of time working with business and charities, really understanding if they have this food and if they can use this food, why aren't they donating it at the moment? And that led us to creating a really simple technology that allows businesses to communicate with local charities, track all of the data. There's traceability from a food safety point of view. So, we need to know that there was 1 croissant donated in Manchester to this one charity at this specific time on this specific day, so that if there's any issues, that we can go back and trace all of the food that's being donated. And once we had the solution, we got Tesco on board. So they're the largest retailer in the UK and in Ireland. And that was fantastic because we developed a model where we charged them a price per store for the service, because they're saving money on reducing food waste and also connecting with their local community. And once we managed to get our first contract with them, it really started to grow, because we're now all of a sudden scaling to 150 Tesco stores in Ireland. A year later, we were scaling to almost 3,000 Tesco stores across the UK. And when other retailers saw that we were working with such a large retailer, it made it a lot easier for them to work with us then. Obviously, when we were 2 very recent graduates with no background in food redistribution or technology, actually, the kind of trust and the credibility wasn't quite there. But getting a really large retailer on board significantly helped with that. So now we've got most of the major retailers in Ireland working with us.
Very cool. I think one thing that people maybe don't always understand is kind of how it works with food waste. So pretty much in every country, once the food hits the table, you can't use it anymore, right? You can't donate it, and the waste happens more with food rotting in grocery stores and that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit more about kind of the dynamics of that.
Yeah, so food waste happens at each stage of the food supply chain, and the waste that we're focused on redistributing is what you'll see in a supermarket. So I'm sure many people have seen the reduced to clear section when they do the yellow stickers in supermarkets and they try and sell food that's near its use by date. So on that day, any food that doesn't sell but is still perfectly edible, they can upload it onto our system and a local charity will get notified about it. So food waste can happen for so many reasons. It's quite complex. Like if the weather is unusual, then if we have really unusually warm weather, people might want to buy more ice cream but buy less hot food. It's very unpredictable a lot of the time in terms of demand. So that's why a lot of food will go to waste at a supermarket level. And then you'll see various different reasons in the supply chain as well. Our team yesterday in Ireland were actually out gleaning, which is where after the machinery harvests the carrots, as it was yesterday, there's a certain amount of carrots that are still just left in the ground that were either kind of too big, too small, broken, too wonky, and the machine just missed them and didn't pick them up. So we actually have volunteers that go around after the machine and pick up all of the carrots. And they end up with, I think they had about 10 or 20 crates of carrots yesterday that then could all go to charity. Like perfectly good food, just looks a bit funny. This is the worst thing about it.
All right. I know in New York we talk a lot about ugly food. They're vegetables and things that look different from other vegetables but are equally good to eat. And it's like probably a huge part of the problem. What do you think, in your mind, what are the hardest parts of this problem, of the hunger problem to fix, and the easiest parts?
I think the hard part is definitely that there's a lot of different reasons why this problem exists, and therefore you need multiple different solutions. And if you need multiple solutions, you need multiple actors, and you need to get them all to kind of work together in a way. The reasons that people are suffering from food poverty in Ireland are going to be very different to the reasons that people are suffering from food poverty in other countries. It's a global problem that every country faces, but for very different reasons. So there's no one size fits all, and I think that can be very challenging. So, you need a lot of people working to solve the problem and trying and failing and trying different ways of making it work. And so I think that definitely, I know the UN World Food Programme do amazing work, but you can even see there's such a large global organisation, and they have so many different ways that they try and tackle the problem. It just, even looking at how that organisation works shows how big a problem and how complex a problem it is. And the easiest, probably redistributing surplus food and making sure that people, when they're hungry, have access to food in their local community that's fresh, nutritious, and affordable. You hear about food deserts, where you can imagine if you're, if you're a single parent with 3 kids and you don't own a car, and the only store that's nearby is a convenience store that sells processed frozen food. If you want to go to a supermarket, you might have to get a taxi. The cost, it's not possible. So even just simple things like making sure that people in communities have easy access to food, I think should just be a basic right.
Right on. Okay, a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So get your questions ready. Where and how are you expanding FoodCloud right now?
Yeah, so we are now developing a model where we can actually license our technology to other charities internationally. So we're working in Central Europe. We actually had our first donation in Poland on Monday, which was very exciting. And we're doing that in partnership with the Polish Food Bank. And we also, earlier this year, started a pilot with the food bank or a food redistribution charity in Australia too. So we're constantly trying to find ways that we can get other charities to benefit from our technology and use our technology to redistribute food, but constantly trying to do it in a more scalable and cost-effective way for us. So the more charities that are using our technology, the more the solution will hopefully improve and get that cost per meal down.
Right on. And final question before we open it up. What can we all do in our daily lives to help the problem of food waste and start to get to a zero hunger trajectory?
Well, on food waste, a lot of food waste actually happens in the home. So just being a lot more aware and mindful of the problem and your own habits, really simple things like don't shop when you're hungry. It really actually works. And then on the food poverty side, like volunteering with a local charity or a local food bank. I think, every like there's amazing global NGOs that are supporting the problem in the developing world, and of course, donating financially to them is fantastic. But it's often difficult for people to support in any other way because it's so far away. But food poverty is a problem in every country, and there are amazing food banks and amazing charities that really understand the local context and how to support people on a local level. And I think if you have time, giving them some of your time and your support and your expertise in some way can make a big benefit.
Right on. I would also put in a plug for composting. I know it's better to not waste it in the first place, but I know in New York, where I live, there are a lot of good programs for that. And I put my food waste in a paper bag and in the freezer, and then once a week there's a stand in front of my building, and just put it in there. It's great, and the garbage is less stinky when you put your compost in the freezer. So anyway, all right. Why don't we move on to questions? Who has a question in the audience? Right here.
In what way are you educating the poorer countries to also grow their own food and have their own food making?
So we're not engaged in that kind of activity at the moment, really. But I think that's kind of will be more the focus with the UN World Food Programme. I think I agree with your point in that it's kind of actually educating people from a long-term sustainable point of view, that they can look after themselves as opposed to being very reliant on food aid. And I think that's where it is very important when organizations do provide food aid or emergency food provisions, that they also provide educational support alongside that. And I think we're seeing many more NGOs, like any of the charities that we work with, because we don't work directly with people, we support charities. So we provide food to them, and then they provide that food to people who need it, but they also provide other supports with that. And I think that's what's very important. But I think we're seeing a lot more of that. There are very few charities that we work with that just provide food. They nearly always provide other supports as well.
First of all, I would like to say it's like a fantastic idea, and it's one of those ideas where you would think, why did no one else did it before? And I think one of the reasons is that the industry doesn't like it, because if you're redistributing food for free, it means the total market will become smaller, isn't it?
Yeah. So the reason that's, I suppose it's more, it's easier for the food industry to donate their food when they know it's going to the charity sector. But they wouldn't necessarily be happy to give it for free for anyone, because obviously that would impact their market, because people would need to buy less. But when they donate it to charity, there are a lot of other benefits that come with it. So on one hand, they're reducing food waste, which means they're reducing their environmental footprint, but also the cost of disposing of food. Also, an employee engagement point of view. So supermarkets can often deal with a high turnover of staff, which can be expensive. And actually giving their employees the opportunity to connect and work with a local charity on a daily basis as part of their day-to-day work is fantastic for employee engagement. So they can see benefits in that way. And then also local brand value, because often the people that work in charities are some of those people who are most connected in their community, particularly in small rural towns. So actually this allows the supermarket to build up their reputation with the local community and to show, actually, no, we want to support this community that we're in, which can be a challenge. So although, yes, they are giving this food away where people could have where this charity might have actually been a customer previously, I think the other benefits actually massively outweigh that potential risk. But it's mildly controlled, because it is only the charity sector that are receiving the food. So that's the only kind of customers they're losing potentially.
I would imagine supermarkets get tax deductions and so forth on that kind of thing, and maybe they save on the cost of having to dump it, right? Those are both probably
So in the US, they have tax deductions. In Ireland and the UK, they don't. In France, they do. In Spain, they do. So it depends on the country. There's different, but there is still a benefit in terms of the cost of disposal. So we still managed to convince them on that front. But it would be brilliant, obviously, for us if there was a tax deduction in every country that we worked in.
Well, if anybody here is from Ireland, write your local representatives. All right, other questions. Here we go. Oh,
Hey, isn't there a risk that when you make it too easy for retail chains to actually dispose their food and have a good feeling about it, that they kind of the incentive to avoid surplus food in the first place gets away?
Yeah. They'll still get a higher economic benefit from preventing food waste from occurring in the first place. So the incentive still exists to reduce food waste, and actually, it's a challenge for us because food waste and reducing food waste is something that we feel very strongly about. But at the same time, we've connected these supermarkets with loads of charities. And when the supermarkets become more efficient, which they often can do because they can actually see all of the food they're donating, as opposed to it just going in a bin and it being forgotten about, they realize how much edible food they're actually redistributing. Then they can change their processes and become more efficient, and we can see it drop in the amount of food. So it's one of the reasons it's quite important for us to make sure the charities we work with have access to different supplies of surplus food, because if they become very reliant on the supply from one supermarket and that supermarket becomes more efficient, then that charity can lose a lot of the food they're getting. So it's like an ongoing concern for us as an organisation that charities do become reliant on the source, and how can we guarantee that that source is going to continue? And it's something that we've seen. So we haven't seen businesses actually increase the amount of food from working with us. They always end up decreasing it, and I do think over time there'll always be some surplus food, but I think we are seeing businesses actively trying to reduce it at the moment. And the environmental argument is huge as well, and I think businesses are becoming more responsible when it comes to their CO impact.
Sorry, quick question. I guess not all the food that is donated is actually going to be needed. So what happens with the surplus food on your level?
So there's a food waste hierarchy where obviously preventing food waste from happening in the first place is the best thing to do. Then it goes to people, then it goes to animal feed, and then compost and anaerobic digestion. So if we can't get it to people, it should go to animal feed. Depending on the country, Ireland has very strict regulation around that. So we'll make sure it goes to anaerobic digestion generally, which creates energy from food waste. But so that's the best we can do with this.
Once the food gets to the charities, what is the process of that food waste going to the people who need it? And what are good parts of it? And what are some inefficiencies that could be targeted by sort of entrepreneurs who are interested in this problem?
So we work with a complete range of charities. So it's actually amazing that so many different services can benefit from food. So we have youth clubs where the charity would have the food, and then kids come after school and they might get a meal while else they're doing their homework, which is obviously fantastic because it's really hard to learn and work when you're hungry. Also employment, so community centres is another great example where actually often they wouldn't have traditionally provided food. And in this case, instead of actually cooking meals on site, they'll often have all of the food available in the hall, reach out to the local community and say, we have food available, and people will come into the centre and actually take food home with them. And that's fantastic because it gets people to socialise, but also can encourage them to engage in classes. So there might be classes to support people around family management, financial management, getting employment, etc. So like one of the community centres we work with in Dublin actually said that the biggest impact he's seen is that he can now get older single men to come into the centre. He said that out of all of the demographics in his area, that was the only demographic that he wasn't able to engage with because they wouldn't come in. all of a sudden now they have food available, so they come in and get the food, and then you start a conversation. They come in the next day, you have another conversation. After a while, they trust you, they start engaging in your classes. So it's similar to the point around, food is an enabler. It starts conversations, it supports important conversations and difficult ones, and it builds trust. And once you establish that, then you can really start helping somebody tackle some of the more challenging problems and hopefully help them with more kind of sustainable longer-term solutions. But it completely varies from community to community. Problems can be very local and different in different communities and cultures.
All right. Any more questions? Two more right here.
So I have a question, kind of talking about, it might be a little different from what you're doing, but when you talk about kind of the hierarchy that like basically it starts with people, then it goes to animal feed, and then it goes to composting. One of the things that I've seen recently is that actually food waste is a really interesting way to use as feedstock to grow insects for animal feeds and for food consumption. I was wondering if you've seen anything related to that, and what are potential bottlenecks, if so, that you think are not facilitating this? Because I've talked to actually insect farmers that they actually are. It's fine. It's hard for them to get access, but there's so much food waste going to bad places.
Yeah, it's a big logistical challenge because the nature of food waste, it's sometimes you can find consistent supplies of food waste. So like an avocado factory would have a supply of avocado stones all of the time, which it's actually bio, so it could be used as food. So you do see like byproducts that might be consistent, but other surpluses actually can fluctuate and can be relatively unpredictable. And then when you put that funny supply alongside the fact that it can be spread out across a country, so like, farms. So actually getting all of that food together, going from farm to farm to farm to collect it, when you don't actually know how predictable the supply is going to be, just makes it very difficult from a logistical point of view to get all of the food waste to the insect farm. But like we are seeing a lot more products being created. So there's Rubies in the Rubble is a really cool jam chutney brand in the UK where they use surplus fruits and vegetables, and they actually employ women that have been in long-term unemployment and struggling to get back into the workforce to make the jam and chutney. So it's a beautiful social enterprise. And the biggest struggle they have is, as the demand grows for their product, finding that consistent supply of surplus berries, even though they know that they're one of the most wasted foods, and there's a lot of them going to waste, like up to 50% of soft fruits can be wasted because they're so perishable and so delicate. So they know the supply is out there, but actually getting that supply to them in a cost-effective way that's consistent enough to meet the growing demand for their product has been one of their biggest challenges in scaling. So although the food is there, it's getting into the one place in a way that actually is cost-effective and sustainable can make it very challenging to use food waste in that way.
Coming to what this gentleman was just talking about, I would say there's just as much inefficiency in what we eat as opposed to what we do with our food. So say, for example, I like the example of beef farming. For every kilogram of plant-based food that's fed to a cow, you only get 15% of that as edible beef. So how would you say we go about changing, say, the mindset of people to look at this? Or say, for example, all the bananas, most of the bananas here, they come from, I don't know, Brazil or something.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, obviously, people should eat less meat. That'd be a great start. But there is a massive challenge around consumer behaviour, and even if, like, from a food waste point of view, everybody gives out about the companies that create all of the food waste. But if you walk into a supermarket at 9 p.m. in the evening and they don't have fresh bread, and then you do it again the same night and they don't have fresh bread again, you're going to go to the supermarket next door and they're going to lose customers. We have like expectations around having full, fruitful, beautiful looking shelves of food at unrealistic times of year, hours of the evening in very urban centres. Like, our expectations are insane. So there has to be a big piece around, like, what is food and where does it come from, I think, to people, because we have become so separate from where food comes from. A lot of people don't have that education. I really think that's probably something that should be starting at a very young age, at a school level. And you see a lot of these kind of educational programs now happening for kids. And I think that's really where you're going to have the greatest impact. We need a generation that really appreciate and respect food and understand where it comes from. And that a banana isn't actually 10 cents. It's a lot of air miles. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of energy that has gone into it. You're not throwing away. I think people throw food away and they think of the 10 cent, or they eat food and they don't realize the actual real impact that is having. So I think bringing that back, introducing people to farms would be a great start.
And farmers markets too. I mean, I feel like in New York anyway. I know it seems like there's a farmers market every few blocks on the weekends. So it's
it's
a
a
good way to go.
fantastic trend, and it's great for local. It's great for like small producers, to have the extra income. But it's also like, I know the farmers markets that have become popular in Dublin, where I live. They're actually like community hubs, and the people are so passionate about their food. It's a much nicer experience than shopping in a supermarket. But it's challenging because you have to go at a specific time on a Saturday, or and be very planned. Whereas we live in a fast-paced convenience world now. Yeah, too easy to get takeaway. Like.
All right, we got time for a couple more questions. Yeah, over there. Hey.
First of all, Iseult, congratulations. Hearing your model live is really your real credit to the 30 Under 30. Thanks for everything you're doing. The SDGs were supposed to solve these problems by 2030. So how do you take this great model you have and apply it to the developing world?
Yeah. So I really think that the key is working in partnership with organizations and getting really, I suppose, the benefits of technology. So our goal is to find charities, and there are a lot of them. Like, there's a global food banking network and there's a European food banking network who we have very good relationships with. And our aim is to develop our technology so that it is scalable and accessible to that network, because there are a lot of food banks in the developing world, because actually a lot of food waste occurs in the developing world as well as in the developed world for different reasons. Often it's to do with lack of equipment and storage at a farm level, so you see really large quantities of food. So we want to provide people with access to technology so that it's much easier for them to tackle these problems and solve this problem. And I really think technology, social entrepreneurs are going to be one of the biggest ways that we can solve the SDGs by 2030, because we move fast and we use technology. And I think our mindset as well helps us overcome a lot of barriers that other people might have. Having met so many people here over the last day, there really is a brilliant mindset of anything, we can achieve anything. And more of the entrepreneurs that are starting up now have sustainability in mind and have these SDGs in mind. So I'm still very optimistic that 2030 is going to be a pretty incredible year where all of these problems are solved.
All right. Time for one more.
I was wondering, sort of as a follow-up of this question, you said that the social entrepreneurs are at the core of solving this problem. Where do you see big companies being involved? How do you see big companies being involved? Because I know at IBM we have a social good program, which I'm involved in, and I'm very keen to be involved with.
Are you with IBM?
I'm with IBM Research.
Oh, cool. We're doing a project on blockchain with IBM at the moment. But yeah, so that's like, if you look at our model, the first business that worked with us was a farmers market. They donated their food to a local charity. It was fantastic. But if we had to go and find every single farmers market and go from business to business to business, it would have taken us years to get where we are today. We're connecting over 3,000 supermarkets with 8,000 charities. That's because we are working with Tesco, Aldi, Lidl, Waitrose. They all have massive networks of supermarkets. So we pitch at a head office level, and all of a sudden we have access to a nationwide number of supermarkets and foods. So I actually think there's massive opportunities for big businesses to partner with social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are looking to solve these problems, because we can move faster and iterate and learn than large companies can. But large companies have the scale and the resources and often the expertise that small entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs won't have access to. So you can see amazing synergies between large companies and small companies when they work together and it works well. So I think that there's huge opportunity there.
All right. Well, one final thing before we get going, Iseult, tell us how we can help FoodCloud more directly help other people.
Yeah, so definitely spread the word. I said, like, if you're volunteering with a local charity, but if there is a local food bank in your community or in your country, definitely telling them about the work that we're doing. The more we speak to these organizations internationally, the more we learn and the more we can improve our solution and make sure that it actually can benefit the organizations that are doing this globally. So for us, it's really just about getting the word out there at the moment and making sure that people are aware of our solution. So hopefully we can help as many people as possible.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time. Thank you all for your time. All right.
Thank you, Iseult and Zack. Ladies and gentlemen, the program continues in 5 minutes, so take